Morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Fatherhood Unplugged. Today I have Brian with me and myself, Van. So we have a couple topics today. We liked how we did those videos last week, but unfortunately, we have some that don't work. So we're gonna just talk through them. Our first one we have right here. It was a video about dad guilt, and it's something that was interesting to Brian, and I'll let him talk through it.
Yeah, so I was thinking as I watched, I'm trying to learn more stuff about being a better parent, being just a better dude, better man. I came across one that called out a couple things for dads and that I could relate to, and it's kind of all of these things that we are expected to do and that we're always striving to be better at. So, you want to be physically fit, you want to be strong, you want to have, that aspect of it so you can model what is a healthy, what does that look like to your kids? So if I'm living healthy and eating right and I'm going to the gym and strong, what does that look like? I also have to, go to work, have a good job, be successful in my career. And then I have to be at home and be present and I have to be a good husband. And then generally speaking, you want to be a good son to your parents, and there's all these things that you're trying to do, and a lot of that stuff conflicts with you being present or like being there for your kids, and you feel guilty about it. It's like, okay, I got to go to work, and sometimes your kids, depending how old your kids are, can make you feel a little bit bad about like, well, I have to be out of the house and I have to take this time to do something to make myself better. And how do we deal with that? Like, what is the right answer? How do you do all these things that are expected and have the time with your kids and plan accordingly and kind of take that guilt away? Because there are times when you can't be there because I go to work, so my kids are going to have some time away from me, or I have a business trip, or I have, I do need to make some decisions for my own physical well-being. So like, blocking out an hour of time to go to the gym, some people feel guilty about that. um, so yeah, so it really kind of struck me as there's this pull of be home and be with your family and be with your kids all of the time, and then there's this pull of like, I need to better myself and be a better quality human. And how do I attain those things? How do I balance them without feeling guilty? And what do I do with that? So it was definitely interesting, because I think if you don't have goals to be better, how can you teach your kids how to chase them? How do you be better if you don't want to be better? So yeah, that's kind of what that was about.
Yeah, I think the video, it was, I was gonna say it was striking, but it really wasn't. I think the the video was an example of some of the common days I have probably. Uh, Not every other day, but I'll probably say it happens once a week, where I'm in my office and I have Jace run in and he wants to play on my keyboard, he wants to sit on my lap, or he wants me to read a book. And it kind of takes some of the things that we kind of talk about every week, and it's one where I think we talked with Marcelo about one of them where uh, one thing that I use is I can't play right now, but I will kind of thing where, oh, I can't read that book right now, but I will after I'm done with this meeting or after work or anything like that. But again, I think I have my own kind of fighting emotions within me when that kind of happens. It's 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 one where it does hurt so, quite a bit sometimes because I think the most important thing uh, in that moment in time or in general where you think that I have to be there for my kid. I have to be there, especially in their earlier years, where you think, oh, I gotta drop everything to play with them. I have to drop everything to read their book for them. But then you kind of think, okay, but there's always that provider mindset that you have to provide, you have to be at your job for them to have some sort of well-being for themselves. So it's a struggle within myself, and I don't know if you were saying about how that video actually was, but it's basically the dad has to go to work, and some of the kids saying, "Oh, don't go to work, dad," or
Yeah.
"You're leaving us," kind of thing. So, I mean, a lot of my kind of lunches are kind of like that, right? Where I gotta go to work and I say goodbye. My kids can't talk quite yet, but I mean, I can kind of feel it inside of me. But some of those, like I said, is when Jace comes in is when it feels the worst, when he wants to read a book or he wants to just sit on my lap to pushing my keyboard where I'm in the middle of a 11 o'clock meeting is basically when that happens the most. And it's a fight within myself, and I don't know if it gets easier.
Um, I don't think it gets easier. I think it's just different because as your kids grow, like, so I know the video, and I wish we could have found it. They were younger kids. And I think as your kids get older, they understand the world a little bit more. So they understand some of your responsibilities, but it doesn't make it any easier. It's just more accepted. So I think that's probably how I would look at it. My kids don't really question when I have to go to work, but sometimes they'll question, oh, well, when can we go do something? Or why can't we go do something? Like, it just comes down to time. And the busier you are, I think the harder it becomes because then it's like, how do I have time to do the things how do I fit everything in? Uh, how do I get time with each kid? If you have more than one kid, it gets harder. If you have one kid, I think it's still challenging. But if you have more than one kid, then okay, how do I have a weekend with this kid so they feel special, and then a weekend with the other kids, and get that individual time? So I don't know if it gets easier. I just think that people or your kids, they just learn to accept it. I don't know if that's good or bad. It's just kind of the way life is. So,
Let me ask you this. If I don't know if society is the person or thing to talk to, if it was changeable, what would you have it be?
oh, I think if it was changeable, what would I have it be? I do like I think a different work-life balance, I think would be more acceptable. And I don't know what that looks like for everybody, but for me, um, I think it'd be more ideal if my time were more equally split. So if like a 4 day work week, I think would be more manageable because then you can fit more time in because then you can plan more. Then you can have it's just easier, right? If you work until 5 o'clock on Friday, and then by the time you get home and have dinner at 7 o'clock, your Friday's done. And then if you have an obligation, some kind of kid event on Saturday, and let's be kind and say that's a 30-minute drive, which is rare. And it's going to be a 3 hour event, right? So then all of a sudden you burn half of your day. And that's assuming you don't eat somewhere, right? So basically you lose half a day on Saturday. You get up, you eat, you take your kids to watch them do stuff. You don't actually interact with them. You get to interact with other parents. Depending on the time, that can either be great. Some parents are that you want to interact with. Some of them you're like, why are you talking to me? Because I don't like you. I think you watch your kid, and it's assuming your kid plays, right? So let's say soccer. So let's assume your kid's good and plays the entire hour or half the game, whatever, because it's back and forth. Um, you burn so much time. You got to eat after because your kids are going to be hungry, and then they're going to come home and they need time to clean up. So your best case is you lose half your day.
I think
So
my move to Houston is probably more in line with your times now because everywhere we typically need to go is about a half an hour.
right.
So I
Yeah.
I get where you're coming from.
And
It's
that's assuming you have one kid event on the weekend.
yeah,
So,
it's not
yeah.
ideal. I think work I don't even know if 4 days. I would break it down even more. I think remote. I think the benefits of being remote are great, but looking from the employer side, I mean, I don't know if it's ideal for them. And to say that, oh, we're always going to be remote forever, and you're not even remote. So
No.
I'm remote right now. So for that to say that that's always going to be it, I can't say that. So if it all came down to it and I had all the choices and I had all the power, I mean, it would be completely remote. I would break down the days. I wouldn't even go just I need 4 days versus 5 days. I would probably break down the morning. I would break down the afternoon. It's kind of sort of what I currently do with when we had Cammy going through her surgery. I mean, we have a little bit longer of a lunch hour than I would either put in more hours before or after kind of thing. But it's not necessarily being able to go to events, and events have to be saved for the weekend or if we need to if I need to take off early in the afternoon, but they're not old enough yet, so I don't have those events yet. So
Yeah,
it's
you'll get
tough
there.
either way. And I think the working thing is something that somebody came up with a way long time ago, and it I mean, money is something that someone came up way long time ago. So I think it all kind of needs to be different if we're supposed to be who we want to be as dads and who we want to be as humans. I think it all has to kind of change. And if you change it, I think it's when you change anything, it's either, oh, you got to get completely rid of it or you just have to make improvements. And I think with this one, I think you need to start from scratch where you can't really figure that out. Um, but,
Yeah.
I mean, any tips for dads out there? I'm sure that that's something that kind of holds them back from being their complete dad self or where they want to be as dads.
I don't, yeah, it's hard. Like, I don't know. Like, the work thing is the work thing. Like, we all have that. Um, I do think that you have to be intentional with your day. I heard recently it was a quote, I don't know who said it. You either can live with intention or exist by default. And I think a lot of people exist by default. So if you want to get things in, you got to figure out when you can do it. So for me, if I want to lift, for example, which I think is important, well, it's just important to me. It's important to my wife. I think physical health is important. I get up at 5 every day. So my kids are asleep. That's the time that I have to put in. So I mean, it's being intentional with my time. It's being intentional with my planning. If I can be, I'm not always the best at that personally. My wife is pretty good at it, so that's super helpful. But I think it's really putting thought into how do I do this. Where you're going to get in, where I get into more of the guilt because again, my kids are older, and once school starts, it's a little harder in the summers because they're here, like they're with me all the time. When school starts, when I'm at work, they're at school, so it's not a big deal. Um, but it's as you start to have conflicts in kids' events is where I start to feel like, oh man, what do I need to do here? Because if I have a kid that has a soccer game, and then a kid that has a gymnastics meet, and then a kid that has a wrestling tournament, who goes where? Like we're lucky that we have 3 parents involved because that's just how my life works. But how do you decide who goes where and how do you justify that to your kids? Like right now, like I happen to be the wrestling parent just because, well, I said I like wrestling and I know the most about it and I can help. Like that's the one I can actually be helpful with. And the kids that I have, that 2 of my kids wrestle, the ones that wrestle need me for that. For soccer, I'm just not as needed because I don't coach. I don't really interact. I just cheer, which is really it's amazing. It's not stressful at all. You can just be dad and cheer is awesome. Same thing for a gymnastics meet, but that's we haven't got into those quite yet this year. I've only done 1 or 2. So it's how do you choose and how do you not feel guilty when you have to not be there for a kid? And I don't have the answer to that, but we just kind of divvied up. These are the things that are my responsibility. These are the things that are going to be another parent and go from there. So yeah, I don't know how you do it. I think you have to be intentional, and I think you have to be open to talking to your kids about, hey, this is why I'm making this choice. Do you agree? And if they don't agree, then you got to talk through it. So I have big conversations with my kids all the time. So
Yeah, I think that's a that's a good one. I think talking to them when they understand what's going on, maybe not even understanding, but just making sure that they know what's going on in your head, and it's not typically something that you would want completely to have to do in terms of work versus be with them. And I think the other thing is be honest with your employer, which
yeah,
I try to be when I have to help during lunch, or I have to help quick change a diaper, or I have to help quick just hold on to one of the kids when something's going on. So um, it's basically just making sure I'm going to be out for this 15 minutes. I'll be right back, kind of thing,
yeah,
or just making sure that I'll put more hours in if I need to take a longer lunch. Making sure that I'll still get my work done and those hours that I can put in, and think about those hours where you're not where your kids are unavailable, if they're taking an afternoon nap, and then
yep,
now that's when you can do work. And then like you said, if you need to get things done on your by yourself, or you need to do your own self-improvement, I mean, think about those hours that your kids aren't around, like wake up earlier or things like that. Or also think about what can you do with them. And I think that's something that we talked about with time management.
yeah. I agree. So for me, like all my self-improvement stuff is fitness stuff I do with the kids actually now. Like all of my kids do something. Two of them are lifters. One of them's a serious lifter. The other one's learning to lift, and one is actively anti-lifting because she's a pain in my ass. But she does other stuff. So like I think that's helped is kind of like showing them the value of that. Uh, for other self-improvement stuff, I don't listen to the radio very often. So whenever I drive, I always listen to audiobooks or podcasts to get ideas or whatever it is. I do think an important call out is for you and I think we did the same job for a really long time, was we're very fortunate um, that we work in an IT field. So it does give us the ability, like as long as you get your work done, you get your work done. And I've been very transparent with my employers, like, hey, I do have kids, and like that's very important to me, and they've been very cool about it. Um, Both on our team when I was on our team and with my new team, everybody's been very understanding of that. If you don't have an employer that's like that, I would I would personally, if I didn't have an employer like, I would look for something else. Because you can always find, another job. But if you're, but you can't go back and get that time back. Like I think the other thing that kind of struck me, um, when I was like looking for like fun videos for us to talk through, what's the best thing about having kids is watching them grow up. And I agree. Like, and what's the worst thing is it's also like watching them grow up as you realize that they're becoming adults is it's hard, like deceptively hard, where you're like, oh, I'm so happy that my kids can do this stuff until you realize like hey, like I only carry one of my kids anymore. Like the other two are just too big. Like I can't do it. Like it's you eventually you're gonna get that last time that you get to carry your kid. You're gonna get that last time that they want to hug you in public. You're gonna get that last time that they want you to be around for a little while, and then they're gonna want to be independent. Um, so it's like managing that stuff too. And I think that's why when they're real little, like all the upfront work, all the upfront time is important and worth the investment. Like I know you and I, we like I said, we had the same job. I'm 100% sure we probably could have got different jobs and we probably could have progressed our careers and made more money faster. But at the same time, we really had a lot of flexibility to spend like I did because my kids are younger than yours. It really gave me that ability to really focus on being a good parent, being a good dad, being there. And now that my kids are a little older, it's I'm trying to pick my career back up. So Or is that balance of, do I build my career as fast as I can and sacrifice family time? Or is it, my career still build it slowly, but then family time is just a little more important. So I don't know what the answer to that is, but I think that's a call out of something to think about.
Yeah,
Or become super awesome before you have kids and then don't worry about it.
I agree. I think if you're in a high performance job that takes all of your time and you can't get out of anything and you're there before you have kids, I think it's difficult. It's going to be difficult. That's something that I would think about people like putting myself in their shoes. I mean, they'd probably have to think about a demotion where they have to take a step back and they have to think
Yeah.
about family and things like that. And I think, yeah, I agree. I think I was fast and heavy when I was single, trying to move up. I remember always having conversations with my managers probably every month about how do I get to the next thing, get to the next thing, where it's not necessarily that much important to me now. Um, and then the other thing, yeah, I totally get where you're coming from about how fast your kids are growing up, and if you're in a 9 to 5, I think there's that appreciation of how they are able to do something, but also that I don't know if fear is the right emotion, but when they're able to do this certain thing and then now you're not going to be able to see them or you don't even get to see them do that first thing or
Yeah.
um you're just missing things as they're growing and they're already bigger than you already thought they would be. So it's that escaping time that you won't get back that just kind of makes, I guess, this kind of wraps it all up into the guilt kind
Yeah.
of thing.
It's actually super interesting. So I had an interaction, and since we haven't talked in a while, I met this guy, super cool dude, at a boxing open house. Two of my kids box, and they had a grand reopening, and this guy rolls in a Lamborghini. Like not a normal Lamborghini. Like we're talking like this dude dumped a ton of money into it, easily a $500,000 car. Gets out, his hat. He's dressed pretty much like everybody else there. Um, Except he's got a $50,000 watch on. And we're talking to this guy because this kid, he wants to box and stuff like that. My, two of mine are doing it, and my son, he's like, "How do you get to where you are?" And he kind of told him, and he's like, "Well, what's the hard part?" He's like, "Well, I work 7 days a week, you know, 10, like 10 or more hours a day." He's like, "I'm just always working. I'm not, I always have the opportunity to be around for stuff like this." Um, and he's probably between our ages, so not quite as old as me, but a little bit older than you. And as I thought about it, and I asked my kids about it, I was like, "Would you rather that I work super hard so that we can have a Lamborghini, but I'm not available? Like I can't go to your stuff. Like so, it's on mom's. It's on. Grandma's got to help, but I'll make sure that we have a Lamborghini and we have a house on the lake and a speedboat and all this other stuff, and we're wealthy, like financially, or would you rather that I spend the time?" And the answer was like quick, like they didn't really think about it. Like, "Oh, I'd rather have your time. Like, I'd rather you be here all the time. I'd rather you take me to boxing. I'd rather you do what you've done because a Lamborghini would be cool, but it'd be cool when you had time to give us a ride, which makes it less cool because then we, don't get to use it." So it really made me think of how appreciative I am of really focusing on that when they were really little. So then it's just never a question like, is dad going to be there? Like the expectation is dad is there. And uh, I think it's like I said, I think it's really hard because it's not making money is so important, and there's so many things, so many stigmas attached to it. But you can feel really, really, really crappy about yourself if you don't make the right amount of money, or if you know there are all kinds of rabbit holes we could go into with like what makes you like a high value person or dude or whatever. But um, having the conversation with my kids made me feel like I did make some of the right choices, where it was spending the time with them versus having all the cool toys that don't matter. So my dad was like that, where he had a bunch of money, and I don't know, he was kind of a less than ideal person. So
Yeah, it
yeah, so
kind of strikes the question, and I mean, we just moved and we moved into a bigger house. So,
yeah, but you got like a lot of people like that, like besides you and your wife in your house, you needed a bigger house.
yeah, we needed a bigger house, but I mean, when that the kind of comes around at the same question though, right? Like there's some needs that you think your family has, but do you make enough money? And when you feel that way versus the time that you think that you're putting into being a great dad and stuff like that, what do you do? Do you put more time into work and you try to build that up and find more opportunities to get more money? Or do you keep doing what you think that is the right thing to do, where you put the time into being a great dad and there's things that your family needs, but you think it's more important to be there for them, and you think the things that you have are already good enough versus putting more time in to get better stuff. So that's something that I sometimes think about. And I think coming down to Houston, I think coming and thinking about having my wife start working, it's something I think about and something that I'm not sure about or how I feel about it. It's kind of something my wife said the other day is just where she's going to start working and she's going to um, provide her own income. It didn't settle with me the right way, and I'm probably not telling the full story for people to understand, but it it's something that I struggle with. All right, Brian, should we shift gears?
Yeah,
All right, so there was a topic that you wanted to talk about in terms of relationships.
yeah. So actually, I was listening to a podcast, and I had to like, so I went to the CrossFit Games when they were in Madison, uh, and had an opportunity to meet some really cool people. One of the people happened to be Jocko, and I was watching a Jocko interview, and he was kind of talking about his relationship with his wife, and like by no means, he didn't call it that it was perfect, but it's pretty solid. They've been married a long time, and Navy SEALs don't have the best. Well, okay, military in general, like military relationships are very hard. They don't have a super high survival rate. Um, and he came and they were kind of talking through his stuff and like how they met and whatnot. And one thing that he called out that he thought was very helpful in his relationship that I thought was interesting was being emotionally independent. So that, his wife is emotionally independent, like takes care of things, like it's just a good partner for him. That's what he needs. And then, same thing for himself, where it kind of brought me back to I've always been an advocate of you're responsible for your own happiness. And I think that if you're emotionally dependent on somebody else, that means they can turn your world upside down, which I don't personally like being. I don't like giving anybody that ability to do that, because that in fact, it impacts your kids, it impacts your overall happiness. And there's just some stuff you can't change. So why give somebody else that? Like just be responsible for your own. So I was just curious on your thoughts on the value of being emotionally independent, but being, also in a relationship and building a family. Like, would you teach that to your kids? Is that something that you would, that you kind of practice yourself? Like, what are your thoughts on it?
Can you give me an example? What do you mean emotionally independent?
So I would assume like the way I view being emotionally independent is I completely own all of my own feelings, and like if I need help, I can ask for it. But in general, like I'm not reliant on a partner to get things done. I'm not reliant on my partner for all of my happiness. So like if I were to take a trip, so for some guys, like if they deploy, can their wife be independent enough to take care of family needs, take care of themselves, take care and hold down the fort at home when you're not there or the other partner's not there, and then allow you to reintegrate back in when you get home. So if you're splitting responsibilities, is it more fluid and you're allowed to kind of come back in and share responsibilities, but you can also swap and do whatever all the time, and you're just okay with somebody not being, like you don't rely on somebody else to bolster your emotions. You don't rely on somebody else to make you happy.
So there's a lot of things in that.
Yeah.
I think the way that I'm interpreting it is your significant other the sole person to make you emotionally happy, and I think you're also talking about physical emotion too, and that's something I would say that's different. So I think, yeah, I mean it depends. I think this kind of goes back to another conversation that we probably had, where I don't think there's one person that is gonna get you to 100% of emotional happiness. I mean, this reminds me of something that Jay Shetty talked about, where you're not going to find your perfect partner. You're not going to find, you might find, I think soulmate is somewhere within there. I mean, that's very subjective of what a soulmate is. I think a soulmate, in my eyes, is somebody that you can grow with, somebody that you're going to be able to change together with. It's something that is not always set in stone. It's like when you meet, it's not necessarily your soulmate, but your soulmates continuously throughout your life. So you're
Mhm.
continually improving and understanding each other, and that's the kind of person that I would want to be with. Where okay, maybe day one we're not seeing eye to eye or knowing what we think about each other, but do we put the time aside to understand that uh, within a year or 10 years time frame?
Yeah.
But the other thing is, there's things that they're not going to be able to talk about with you. My wife doesn't really like sports, and like that's something I really like. So I have a friend that I talk to about that, and I think that's completely fine because my wife could care less about sports. I think it's important for me to see that she takes an interest because I have an interest a little
Mhm.
bit, but I'm not going to say, oh, why don't you know what a first down is in football? Or why don't you know what that yellow flag means when they throw it? It's like whatever. But I'm gonna go talk to the people that I typically talk to about sports, and they know what they're talking about, and where we can have actually a decent conversation about what's going on. Or with you, like my wife kind of likes fitness, but there's things that technically she wouldn't care about or know, or I don't want or push her to know about, where I could
Mhm.
talk to you. It's like, okay, did I do that squat right? Oh, Brian, I just did a 400-pound squat. That's
Good.
pretty good. Or uh so it's stuff like that, or like this pod, like this is something that I do because I enjoy it, and there's certain things on here that I wouldn't expect fully that Ian would care about. But it's something that kind of makes me happy, and I think this is something that I don't know if I grew into it, but I was the baby of the family, so I was with my parents for about 3 years, just with them. So I kind of learned to be myself and learned to be someone to kind of find my own happiness with it with other people, and not necessarily with the family or be dependent on anybody. And that's something that I did when I went to college. I think I wasn't one to come home during the summer when we were done when I was done with school. So I think a lot of people do that, but for me, I was kind of someone that was able to find that on my own. So that was kind of something that I learned, or maybe kind of sort of came naturally to me.
Nice.
How about you?
Um, I've always been kind of independent, and I think that with my wife right now, like my there's she's my favorite person. I love to be with her. But I also am very understanding of her needs and what she needs to be. Like she likes to go to the gym as well. So if she needs to be up on a Saturday at 6 to get to the gym before we go do stuff with the family, like I'm not going to take that personal. Like I understand her needs and they're like again, like they're separate from mine. Um, so I think that's a big part of it for me is when I realize that again, my happiness is my responsibility. My wife feels the same way. Like we can assist each other in being happy, like as in we can be happy with each other, we can be happy for each other, but it's not necessarily and she does make me happy, as in, she can, she's my person. But if I were to solely rely on that and we became dependent, then I think that that takes a toll on your relationship. Because what happens when something changes? What happens when you're in a season of life that just sucks? And that happens, like the next year for us is just going to be insanely busy. So I think it's, you have to own yourself. You have to own your own emotions and understand that. So that's kind of what it is for me, is being responsible for your own happiness, understanding your own needs and communicating those appropriately. So you can say, hey, like, this is what I need for me, and it's not about you. And some people don't do that. Like I do know there are some couples where if one partner goes to the gym, they're like, why are you choosing the gym over me? Which I think is it's a whole own topic, but it's being secure enough and independent enough to know that like my wife doesn't choose stuff over me; she chooses stuff for her, and I don't choose stuff over my wife or children. Like sometimes I do choose things for me. Like if I'm need to get something done to make me better, then I do that and I choose it for me and I explain it being I'm open and I communicate and stuff like that. So that's how I kind of took it as you're separate people, you're independent, you're sharing something amazing together and creating something and building. So yeah. So I think that's kind of where I was at. I think we're
I was gonna
probably
say,
getting
sorry, I was gonna say, I think that's another thing, um, about dad guilt. I think I'm still working through that. I think there's a little bit of guilt on the the husband and wife side as well. So where maybe my wife won't be able to go to the gym, but I say, oh, I'm going to take this time to go to the gym. So I think you also, for me, like I would say that there's a time that I wouldn't go because I would say, oh, she didn't have an opportunity to go yet either. So I want that equal opportunity for both of us to be able to do something. So if she, oh, I want to go to the gym and she says no, it's kind of me thinking about, okay, why is she saying no? She wants me to do this, but oh, she hasn't had the time to do it either, or she needs me to help with this certain thing for the kids or something like that. So there's a little bit of that, and then also just making sure that you take care of yourself, but also help take care of your wife and your kids too, for her to have the opportunity to do it too.
I agree. So I think we probably wrap it up. I think people just got to think about what they need, what the kids need, and balance it out and just realize that it's sometimes it's just not going to be perfect. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to have to make choices that you don't love, and it is what it is. But you just got to keep on moving in what you consider a positive direction.
Thank you for listening to our podcast. Now, think about something that you can put into action immediately that you learned today. And if you think that there's someone out there that can really benefit from what they heard today, share it with them. Until next time.